We love our pets like family, but unlike most family members, we can't ask, "How you doing? What do you want for dinner? Are you happy? What do you think of the food I just gave you? Do you love me?" What if we could? I'm Lexi, and this is Delightfully Different. Sometimes they're called pet psychics, animal communicators, or animal whisperers. My next guest claims that she can talk to animals, both alive and dead. She's got so many clients that she's booked out for 3 years, and she says she can teach you how to do it too.
Hi, my name is Alex. I'm an animal communicator.
So Alex, what do you do as an animal communicator? Explain it.
Okay, that's an excellent question. I get this question all the time, even surprisingly from people who are into more spiritual things and still haven't heard of animal communicators. So what I do is essentially very similar to what a professional medium would do, where mediums will communicate with past loved ones who have crossed over, family members and such. But my focus is primarily on using those skills and modalities with animals more specifically.
Gotcha. So when you are communicating with an animal, how are you receiving their message? Is it like in words? Is it audio? Is it smell? How are you getting it?
Great question. So the way that I receive the information from them is through a combination of pictures, words, and feelings. Oh. This is truly a universal language, a universal way of communicating, and they're pros at it. Humans, we sort of have to remember of sorts and train our brain to do it, although it's perfectly equipped to do it. But animals are absolute pros at this. So they communicate with each other in the natural world this way very easily. So they can send information in a cluster of different ways and they can do it faster than us. So sometimes I might get one picture in particular. Sometimes I might get a full sentence of words, and then sometimes I might get a feeling. And other times I'll get all of the above all at once. So it just depends on the personality of the animal and how they choose to present the information.
And it's like an energy that has been transferred to you. Mm-hmm. And yep. Can you, if you're walking down the street and you see animals, are you able to read them, or are they sending you messages without you even asking?
Okay, that is such a good question. This is very much a consensual two-way conversation where both of us are usually very conscious of what's happening. That being said, I have had animals accidentally send things over. Okay. And sometimes it's kind of and sometimes humans actually do this all the time. So if you've ever been in a grocery store and you just kind of pick up a feeling from someone nearby, that's actual telepathic static interference that we're experiencing in our environment. So because I'm already so attuned to this type of communication, sometimes I can sort of pick up that static interference. That being said, I try very hard to make sure that it's a consensual conversation, that they've agreed to it, that I've agreed to it, and that their owner has as well. That's super important to me. So I don't typically carry on a conversation with an animal where the owner doesn't know that I'm doing that.
Could the animal possibly tell you their owner's secrets?
Technically, yes. But animals are really cool about this stuff because they're very good about their boundaries. They have such a strong relationship with us already that they're very mindful about that. And so they won't share with me things that they don't think their owner is going to want me to know. Okay. And this happens all the time, even with my students. So I teach people how to do this, and they all practice with a group of my own animals. And so they have access to all my animals, who obviously have access to me 24/7. Yeah. And one of my students did ask one time, they're like, "Are you ever worried about people asking questions to sort of spy on you at home?" And I was like, "No, I'm not. Not at all, because things you're not supposed to know, my animals aren't going to tell you." So they are good about that.
When you're asking them questions or making sure it's okay to be talking to them in the first place and have that conversation, is it in English words, or are you also emitting an energy?
Yeah, so it also depends on the person receiving the information. So this is where this plot twist. Humans can also receive information depending on how their brain takes in information from their environment. So I'll break it down for you. So we take in as much as billions of bits of information in through our brain at one time through our environment, which is too much for the brain to be able to comprehend and understand. Right. So the way that the brain works is it will actually break down those pieces of information into bite-sized pieces. And at first, that information gets filtered through our five senses. So it's through our auditory sense, kinesthetic sense, gustatory, olfactory, and visual. So it gets filtered through our five senses. And each individual person has a stronger sense than another. So, for example, if somebody is really auditory, they're really good at self-talk. Like there's a lot of thoughts happening in their head, right?
Yeah.
And if somebody is more visual, they can come up with pictures in their head really easily. And if somebody's more kinesthetic, they feel things in their body very deeply. Okay. So depending on the type of person and which senses they're more attuned to and how their brain takes in that information will also bring in the incoming information through that primary sense. So for me, more specifically, to give this into more like tangible terms, yeah. I'm a highly auditory and visual reader. Okay. So when information comes through, I get a lot of words. So even if energetically they're trying to send the words or send information, my unconscious mind might still filter that information and translate it towards in a way that I will understand and be able to digest it. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense. I can't believe it does, but it makes sense. When did all of this start for you? Were you able to do this as a child, or when did it come together as this is something I can do?
Yeah, definitely. So I believe wholeheartedly and know as far as biological breakdown of the body that everybody is capable of learning this type of skill. Our brains are literally wired for it. Our body is literally doing it already. This is actually where I always giggle when people say like, how do you do this? Or is this even real? Or I can't do it, or they're skeptical. And I'm like, you can be skeptical all you want, but the fact of the matter is that you're doing it and you don't even realize it. So the difference is that I took the time to build that muscle, just like anybody would build a muscle for athlete, right? Okay. Or for athletics. So I was always into this sort of thing. There was a time in my life when I was younger that I wasn't, but I wouldn't say that I was always consciously aware of this communication growing up. Can I look back as a child and say, oh, yeah, I can see where those things come into play? Of course, but every child is actually really good at this. And the reason why is because this type of communication is ruled by our unconscious mind. It goes through the unconscious mind first. And so when children are developing, they're totally unconscious beings from age 0 to 7 or 8 years old. And around 7 or 8 years old, that's when the conscious brain starts to develop and activate. And that's actually when we start to lose more of our intuitive abilities, because it's the conscious mind that starts to then filter what it thinks is important. And that's also when beliefs start to come into play of, our environment saying that this stuff isn't real. So children are really natural. They don't even realize how natural they are. They're just taking in raw data and information, psychically, intuitively, and otherwise. So as a child, yes. But what really happened for me was going through neuro-linguistic programming training and hypnotherapy. Okay. And I was really obsessed with the brain. I wanted to know, like, how do I take this magnificent untapped tool and utilize it and train it to do what I want it to do so that I can live the life that I want, right? So I deep dove into those types of tools and exercises. And my entire goal with that was that I wanted to figure out how to utilize these tools with animals to help them heal, emotionally speaking. And I was like, okay, theoretically, if we can bridge the gap between these tools and the communication piece, this should work, right? I know it works on humans, and I also know the animals are way more receptive because they're not as stubborn as us. So, so how can we get there? And I actually used all of that training to then essentially get back in touch with my divine intuition and practically work those muscles so that I could get better at the skill. And I knew that it was possible for me specifically because one day my horse told me he was choking. Okay. And this, even for me in my moment, I was like, okay, am I crazy? Have I lost my mind? I can't tell people about this. They're going to think I'm a lunatic. So we were feeding our horses one time. We put out a huge bale out into their pasture, and he took a corner of it off and all of a sudden got really lethargic. And so he came up to the fence line and he had stuff coming out of his nose, and he just was looking really like sick all of a sudden. And even equine people who have had horses for a long time, most people have not seen a horse choke before. Mm-mm. And most people don't realize it doesn't look how you think it would look. So I didn't know what was happening. And I was like, what is going on? Is he colicking? And I'm freaking out. I'm like, let's call the vet. I don't know what's going on here. And then all of a sudden in my head, I hear an undeniable, I can't breathe. And I was like really taken aback. I was like, whoa, oh my gosh, is he choking? I'm Googling it. My mom's calling the vet. And everything I'm reading, I'm like, oh my God, I think he's choking. I think that's why he said I can't breathe. I think he's choking. We tell the vet about it. He agrees over the phone. He's like, he's probably choking. Don't worry. Don't panic. Horses actually resolve that on their own a lot, like most of the time.
Okay.
But but I'm a better be safe than sorry kind of girl. So I was like, nah, we're loading him up. I'm bringing him in. I'll see you in 10 minutes. And it did turn out that that's what was happening. And they did actually have to tube him to clear the blockage. So really glad.
And was that before you started doing any of this? This is something that happened before you even decided that this was your career path?
Yeah, actually. So that event happened right on the precipice of me diving into all the things about the brain and the body and how that works.
Okay, gotcha.
So it was sort of in tandem, which was really cool for me because then I saw firsthand, right, that I was like, oh, anybody can learn this. And then I was like, well, how do I do that on purpose? Because that was on accident. How do I learn to do this on purpose?
Right.
And so that actually just set me down my journey.
Okay. All right. And now sometimes the stuff that the animals are telling you, because I've been watching all of your videos, are very specific things. And the one that really struck me recently is you talked about a dog suggesting that their owner get a painting of them for a Christmas gift. So this dog's understanding what a gift is, what holidays are, what Christmas is, what a painting is.
Mm-hmm.
Is coming through that specifically? Are you telling me the animal understands what all these human things are?
Oh yeah. This is actually such a big passion project of the work that I'm doing is trying to express and show people how truly intelligent they are. And we actually even have studies coming out about dogs understanding how to count, and they will count their treats. And these studies are proving it. Yeah. And so they'll know when they're getting shorted their treats because they're counting. And so and to me, I'm like, animal communicators have known this for a long time, but we're excited that science is catching up, right? but they take in so much information, and even sometimes they might not conceptually understand something, but they can pick up labels. So dogs have even understood, hey, when my mom pulls out this phone, she's recording a video of me, but they don't quite conceptually understand where it goes or how it's viewed afterwards.
Okay.
Or they've even brought up the internet. Like a few of them understand that information is received through the internet. And this is where people are so funny. I'll get these comments like, there's no way they know how the internet works. And I'm like, do you know how the internet works?
No.
I don't. I know that it does work, but I don't know how it works. I use it. So dogs are animals can approach things very similarly, where they will understand a broad concept or pick up labels for things, but then don't always understand exactly the construction behind it, if that makes sense.
That's interesting. What kind of clients do you have? What kind of people seek you out?
Good question. So I actually have I have a 3-year wait list of clients.
I saw
and
that.
So so I do have a lot of new clients, and then I have some repeat clients. So typically, and it's funny because drawing a conclusion of the types of human clients I get is harder to answer than telling you what types of animal clients I have. But most often I'm working with people with dogs and cats and horses and those types of things. Just recently I did have a session with a monkey for the first time. So that was super fun. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are they better at communicating than the rest of the animals?
Okay, this is what was such a surprise to me. And you would think I would think about this ahead of time, but I didn't. But I was like, okay, we've got a monkey. They're crazy, crazy smart. So this should be a breeze. And I was so excited about it, like literally weeks in advance. I was like, oh my God, there's a monkey in my docket. Let's go. And I get tuned in with him, and he's bonkers cautious of me.
Really?
Yes. And it was after the session that I was telling my partner about this, that I had to work so hard for him to like feel comfortable coming in and communicating with me. And he's like, well, yeah, Alex, it's a monkey. Like they're that way by nature. And I was like, I didn't even think about that. I just was like, they're so smart. This should be so easy. But it was funny. I actually gave that client some extra time because it took so long to get him to feel comfortable, and I wanted her to still get the value and have her questions answered, but we had to go back and forth where I figured out if I let him ask me questions about myself, the more he'd warm up. So we'd kind of go back and forth. Like, he got to ask me a few questions and I would ask him one. And then he got to ask me a few more questions and then I would ask him one. And over time he got comfortable, and then it was fine. But it was funny. It was something I didn't expect.
What are the kinds of questions that he was asking you? Like,
He wanted I get funny questions sometimes. Sometimes animals will ask me if I'm a human, right?
Okay.
Because, which totally makes sense because they can't see me and we're just tuned in energetically and remotely. And to them, they don't get an opportunity to do this with humans so consciously like this, right? So they're usually communicating with each other. They can also communicate sometimes with their own spirit team or with our past loved ones that are around. That's really common. And so the question of asking me if I'm human is perfectly valid. And so he did ask me that. He also asked if I would be coming to the house and meeting him in person. And I told him no. And that made him more comfortable, right? That he wasn't going to have that pressure. And the owner did tell me afterwards, she's like, yeah, he's very shy. He doesn't interact with people very often when I have visitors. He prefers to just watch. So it made a lot of sense to her and his personality that he approached me this way. But he asked me all kinds of things. And he asked me how often I do this, like work with animals. And then he started to ask me questions about the cat in the house.
Okay.
So that's really where things started to kind of get warmed up and unravel, because I found out he was extremely curious about the cat and so badly wanted to have a relationship with her.
Really?
And yeah, it was so funny. And so he had questions about her, like, how can I do this? How can I make her feel comfortable with me? And the owner told me that the cat he was talking about, he actually used to watch outside as a stray. So through the window, he could see her outside as a stray for almost a year before they brought her in. And so he's been watching her since before they even owned her, right? So he had this really big curiosity about her, how she was doing, and if they could be friends.
Now, what is like the most common question among people about their animals?
I would say the most common question is definitely what types of activities they like to do the best.
Okay.
I get that question a lot, right? And I actually love that question so much because surprisingly, animals are so diverse with this question, and it is definitely not like a one size fits all as far as activities for any species. And some dogs might really, really love to go on walks. And I've had other dogs say, I really don't enjoy walks. I'd prefer to do something else.
Okay.
And so, yeah, so I love that question. A second one would definitely be health, like how they're feeling in their body, if there's any aches or pains that they should know about. I love that question. And then food definitely would be the third.
Okay. Yeah. And now when it's someone's pet or a domestic animal and like a wild animal, do they communicate differently or do you receive the messages differently? I know we just got a Mustang this year and he's definitely not like other horses. He's a different creature. And do they communicate differently?
Yeah, Mustangs are so different. So different. I also have a Mustang of mine, and him with my other more traditionally domesticated brought up animals they're a different animal. So I will share that more often than not, wildlife are definitely more cautious of animals that, versus the ones that I'm working with in a session. And part of that is because domesticated animals obviously have a different foundation as far as relationships with people. Yeah. And so they're more comfortable with that in general. But also the animals that I'm working with inside of a session know I'm coming. They already know the session is happening. They can pick it up from their owner telepathically. They're expecting me every single time. Okay. So they're usually pretty open and ready to go. Whereas when I'm communicating with an animal in the wild who isn't quite prepared for me, one, they might be cautious of me, like, why are you tuning in? What do you want? or two, sometimes they've told me like, hey, I'm hunting right now. I'm busy. I'm not available. And then I'm like, okay, that's fair.
Okay. Mm-hmm. What is the most requested item? You do on your videos, you have a lot where you talk about the top 5 things that your dog asks for, the top 5 things your cat. What is the most requested item from a dog, a cat, and a horse?
Games. They want games.
Really?
Oh my gosh, yes. Like they want all 3, literally all 3. Every single time. Activities are probably, the horses actually surprisingly, and probably for you having experience with horses, not surprising. They request games more than any other animal that I talk to. But it makes sense because they're the animal that we do the least amount with when it comes to playing, right? It's always training or riding, or do you know what I mean? So that really has actually made me a much better horse owner, this job, and learning those things. But yeah, games and activities that they can do with interaction and just more creative ways of spending their time is by far the biggest thing that comes through.
I'm Lexi, and this is Delightfully Different. Today I'm talking with pet communicator Alex.
How many animals do you personally have?
Oh gosh. Okay, so we have 3 dogs right now, 1 cat, and 4 horses.
That's a lot of animals.
Yeah, it is.
What do the people in your life think about this? You've got a significant other?
I do. Yep. I have Rob. He's my partner. He is by far my biggest supporter, and it's been really awesome to have him because, like I said, I teach a lot of people, and it's really tricky for people when they're wanting to learn these skills, but their spouse is cautious or not on board or super skeptical or think it's weird, right? Which I get that, totally get that. Rob has never been that way with me. In fact, he's been the one who has encouraged me to go public online when I was nervous to do that.
Really? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I know your mother. What does your mom?
You do know my mom.
Pals with your mom. What does your mom think?
My mom took my class.
She did. Okay.
She did. Yep. So she's actually a very good communicator herself.
She is.
And yes, and it's been so fun because learning how to communicate with animals is the best way to start to cultivate your intuition in general, because they're such a pure place to practice from, and they're a really safe space to develop those skills. And so it's really awesome to watch some of the students come in and learn these things and then watch their other intuitive skills excel, which is exactly what happened to my mom. So now she's got people who have crossed over that pop in all the time, and she's communicating with angels and guides. And so watching her flourish with this has been really awesome.
Wow. Okay. So she's all in. Now you teach classes. You said anybody has the ability to do this, and you teach the classes besides doing the sessions with people where you're communicating with their pet. Where do you teach the classes? Is it like an online thing or is it in person?
It is online. Yep. All of our animal communication for beginners courses are online. We have a self-study that's a more affordable, self-paced option for people that just want to kind of dive in and dip their toes in. And then we have a group course that's much more immersive and interactive. That's an 8-week program where we take people through each week and do practices with them.
And then you also do a free connect with your pet meditation on occasion?
I do.
What happens during that?
That is actually always available and up. So if anybody ever finds me on social media and wants that, it's always in the linked in my bio. So that is a really cool meditation that takes people through the steps of being able to connect with their own pet. And I get messages about this all the time with people who have tried it. And then they're like, oh my gosh, this crazy thing happened. And we're seeing behavioral changes. So it's a really awesome tool to get started too.
Okay, nice. And you said you're booked out for a few years. When did you start the business? When did this become an actual business for you?
In 2020. So it was during lockdown that I decided I wanted to do it. And I didn't publicly say anything until end of 2020, beginning of 2021.
And now you're booked out 3 years. When did you get booked out? And when you got first booked out, what did it feel like?
Yeah, when I very first started, it was such a cool thing to have one session a month, right? I was like, woo, we have one person. This is fantastic. And then that became 2. And then we had a few more a week. And so it actually took quite a while because I was so scared to go public with it, right? I was scared of what people would think. I was scared of what family members would think. I had a real estate business at the time, so I was nervous to lose clients over it. And it was actually when I decided to go more public with it that the ball really got rolling. And what I found was that way more people were into it than what I'd previously thought. And so it took probably about 6 months from the time of going public for me to be booked out for 3 months. Right. And then the 3-month thing, I ended up capping it because I was booking myself out months in advance. And my schedule was so tight that I was like, oh crap, I never gave myself any wiggle room that if I have an emergency or I get sick, I can't reschedule anybody. So I had to, had some learning curves there, but it was probably, I'm trying to think, it was a little over a year, I think, that I went from having just a few sessions to being booked out for a year and a half and then 3 years.
That's amazing. I am so happy for you. Why do you think people are so drawn to wanting to have you communicate with their animal and tell them what they're thinking?
I think I have a very different approach than a lot of animal communicators have had in the past. And part of that is because of my educational background with neurolinguistics and hypnotherapy and different things like that. So I think that I have been able to build my skills at an accelerated rate. And that's why I get such specific information. And ultimately, people saw the value in that and were drawn to it.
I love it. Now, you said that the animal does not have to be alive. You can talk with an animal that has crossed over. And is it the same process?
It is literally the same process. The only thing I tell people is that sometimes when they cross over, they're in spirit, right? So they can be, this type of communication can feel abstract in general because it is different than you and I speaking verbally, right? We're very used to very specific words. They can communicate in a plethora of different ways. And so sometimes even in a regular session with an animal here, bits of pieces of information can come through and it can kind of feel like getting ingredients to a recipe without knowing what the recipe is, and you have to figure it out.
Yeah.
Which is fine. I'm used to doing that. But then you have an animal in spirit, and sometimes they can come across just very ethereal. And so when they communicate, it can be slightly different in the sense that the information can feel a bit more abstract than when an animal's currently earthside.
Okay. And now, can you also communicate with dead people?
Yes. Yeah. People who have crossed over come through in sessions all the time.
Like by accident or on purpose?
Typically it's the animal bringing them in, which is always really special because so the animal either here alive, right, earthside, can say, hey, by the way, grandma always comes around and she's here and she has a few things to say. And so they'll actually introduce the family member into the session, which is great for me because it's way more reliable than me going off into the ethers trying to see if I can find the family member. Because humans or entities on the other side can mimic dead ancestors. And so it's really important to make sure that you've got the right one. And animals are, this is why I don't do regular mediumship. It's not as reliable in my opinion, but animals bringing them in, animals bringing them in is super reliable. Otherwise, there are, some other really incredible mediums out there that are very good at, making sure they've got the right person there. But animals will bring them in, and even animals who have crossed over will share, hey, this person is here with me. They were here when I passed, and they're with me watching you too.
Now, when you do sessions with people, is it in person or do you do them online in a video chat like we're doing now?
All online. Yep.
All online. Okay, gotcha. And then are you still selling real estate or did you quit doing that and you're just doing this now?
Oh, yeah. I put my hat up about a year and a half ago.
Congratulations. Now you're living the dream.
I am living the dream.
I feel like you're living the dream too. You get to be around animals all the time. You're doing everything you've ever wanted to do. Now, has there ever been anything that an animal communicated to you that was negative or bad that you did not want to tell their person about?
Yes. Oh, yes, definitely. So I can think of one in particular that caught me off guard, especially because I knew the person. Oftentimes I don't know the clients and we're complete beautiful strangers when we pop up on the screen. But this person I did know, and their dog popped in and said, hey, the person, there's a person in my mom's life that goes through her things when she's not looking. Like when she's like when she's having a party and he says he goes through her things. She needs to know this. And as I'm sharing this information, it's not clicking to me who it is. I'm just sharing the information, right? I try to do a really good job having good bedside manner, and I have a mantra like do no harm, do no harm, do no harm. Right. Because it's also information coming from the animal's perspective, right? They may not always evaluate an environment or a situation the same way that we would. So I always preface and disclose those things before I share anything, but I want to be in integrity with what they're saying. So that information was coming through, and as it did, and I shared it with her, the human on the other end started looking off screen, and I realized that this person was in the room, and that the dog was like, it's the boyfriend. And I was like, oh. But to me, again, who knows if ill intention, right? It could simply be he's looking for something, or she asked him to get something. Who knows? Who knows? I did find out later that the suspicion actually was true and did need to be addressed.
Really? So the animal caught a creepy boyfriend doing something creepy.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
Now, do animals dream? You know, I see my dog sleeping, doing that all the time and making noises. Is he dreaming?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
In one of your videos, you talked about how you leave the TV on for your animals when you're gone. It's something that I used to do too, and it made me laugh because I don't know why I did it. Why do you do it?
Great question. So for me, some animals actually really like watching TV. We do have to be mindful of that though, because dogs can watch things, but it kind of comes in like still pictures. They don't process the video the same way that we do.
Really?
So we have to, yeah, I actually just found that out. And because the dog was talking about showing me just like images. And I was like, that's interesting that he's not showing me the movie. So I did just find that out. So I do want to make sure that when we're putting on the TV, we're not putting on something scary, right?
Okay.
And my dogs have told me before, like, don't leave Animal Planet on because there's a vet show that comes on and we don't like it. It freaks us out. And
that's what I used to leave on. I thought they liked it.
No, it's so funny. I thought the same thing, and I figured it out because it popped on later, and I was like, oh, no wonder they don't like that. So that's one thing, and they also don't like the news. I hate the news.
Yeah, I don't blame them.
I don't either. That's a common request. Like, please don't put it on the news.
That is too funny. Now, you are very well educated. You've gone through a bunch of classes and stuff. Are there certifications to do this sort of a thing? Like, is there a governing body?
There is not. Nope.
Okay.
There is not. So I always tell people, you know, when you are looking for an animal communicator, it's great to find one through referral or word of mouth because sometimes you don't know what you're going to get. But usually, you know, reputations will help people decipher and figure out who's going to be good. Okay.
And now you have listed on your profiles that you're a master Huna practitioner. Am I saying that correctly?
Yep.
Huna? What is that?
Okay, so Huna is an ancient Hawaiian practice. It's kind of like Reiki, but it's like comparing apples to oranges because Reiki traditionally works with the chakra system, the energetic body. Huna works with the unconscious mind, the conscious mind, and higher conscious mind, as well as the chakra system and the energetic body. Okay. So it's very robust. There are different Huna practices that we do to help release trapped emotions neurologically and unconsciously from the body. And then also, you know, doing more traditional types of energy work with that as well. And additionally, it's a philosophy and a way of life around creating what you want in your environment consciously, like master manifesting sort of thing.
And that helps you with communicating with animals?
It helped me communicate with animals. It's also helped me build the business and make sure that the work can get out there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what do you say to people who call this a bunch of bull honky?
I mean, I'm happy to tell them they do it.
You're laughing all the way to the bank, man. You're
oh my gosh,
booked out.
Yes. That's actually what's so fun for me now is like, I'm like, girlfriend, you can think whatever you want, but my business says otherwise. There is evidence procedure to say the latter. But I do always tell people it's very similar to, you know, us thinking about a friend or family member, and next thing we know, they're calling us on the phone and we're like, that was weird. I was just thinking about you. But there was a telepathic connection that happened there. Twins also do this all the time. So this is something that humans are designed to do. So they can think whatever they want. But the fact is they're doing it.
And now you've got your classes and people, you're 3 years booked out on the sessions. So, but still, where do people go if they want to take your classes, if they want to sign up for any of the fun things that you're doing?
Yeah. So definitely find me on my Instagram. I'm at Pet Talk with Alex on Instagram and on TikTok. And in both places, I have links in my bio to all of the resources, including if people do want a session, they can work with one of my graduate students. We have those students as options to be able to get a session. And it also directs people to all the classes as well.
Well, I'm going to put links to all that when I post this podcast. And I'm very happy for you. It sounds like you are really are living the dream, and I'm stoked for you. And I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. I'm glad we finally made it happen.
I know. I had like a full circle moment, meeting you back in the Broadway days and then coming on here. It's so exciting for me. So thank you for having me.
Links to book a session or learn from Alex are posted with this podcast. Is Alex actually talking to the animals? Well, that's up to you to decide. I know she's good with animals. I also know a lot of people believe her, and she's very successful at her career. A quick Google search shows tons of pet psychics all over the world. It also shows tons of skeptics who point to a lack of scientific evidence. Whether animal communication is real or not, it's fun, kind of like getting your tarot cards read. And if your pet passes, it might help with bereavement. Thanks for joining me this week on Delightfully Different. Coming up next week, we'll talk about micronations. That's when someone buys a small piece of land and proclaims it a new nation. If you or someone you know lives life differently, hit me up, lexiontheradio@gmail.com. That's LEXI on the radio@gmail.com. Or go to delightfullydifferentpodcast.com and have a delightful week.